What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So this is probably the last time I talk about anything related to the Trump incident on Saturday, unless there's something that develops that's very significant. I'm going to do a video about this probably, I think it was yesterday, but I had other videos to do. This country's had a very, very long history of violence. Well, violence in general. We're probably the most violent country in the world, even though we don't like to think of ourselves like that, but we're the most violent country in the world. And we have a long history of violence. And what happened to President Trump is unfortunately not very unique in this country. It's not. It's happened time and time and time again. Increasingly, I would say in the past 50 to 60 years, because we've become an increasingly more violent country. Attempts on the presidents have been recorded since 1835. Now, we all know of the presidents that unfortunately were taken out by individuals. The first one being Abraham Lincoln in 1865, the second being James A. Garfield in 1881, the third being William McKinley in 1901, and the last, John F. Kennedy in 1963. Incidentally, William McKinley and James A. Garfield should have survived. And if had it been, especially McKinley, had these incidences occurred today, those two men would have survived. Kennedy and Lincoln, especially Kennedy, it's no hope. That was a hopeless situation, especially for Kennedy. Lincoln probably would have been a vegetable at best. But those two men should have survived. What hurt them not even was the limited medicine at the time, but their doctors, and especially when it came to Garfield. His doctor did more harm than good. A lot of it was infection, and what came to Garfield, and with McKinley, it was I think an infection that got him. Had that happened in the age of antibiotics, McKinley probably would have survived. He probably would have been hospitalized for 2 weeks, and he would have made a recovery. But other than that, we've also had incidences, of course, where presidents were wounded. I believe we've had 3 presidents who were wounded. Theodore Roosevelt in 1912, which happened, ironically, I think it was Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is the site where the RNC is being held this week. The other one, Ronald Reagan in 1981, and now Donald Trump, the 3 presidents that were wounded but survived. But we've had a number of other incidences that were thwarted by divinity, or it got to the point where the planning phase, it never got beyond, I should say, the planning phase. So the first one was in 1835. It was outside the Capitol building, and a house painter by the name of Richard Lawrence, who was mentally not all there, attempted to take out President Andrew Jackson. He had 2 pistols. Both of these pistols miraculously misfired at point blank range. I say miraculously because both of those pistols were tested not long afterwards, and they worked perfectly. But for some reason, they misfired. I guess people today would call that divine intervention, maybe like what happened the other day. By the way, after the threat was over, 67-year-old Andrew Jackson beat the shit out of Lawrence with his cane. The next incident that was recorded was 2 different incidences with Abraham Lincoln before the fatal incident that happened in 1865. So in 1861, before Lincoln was inaugurated. Matter of fact, I think Lincoln was en route to D.C. At that time. Most people traveled by carriage, horse and carriage and whatever, horse and buggy, whatever you called it. And he was passing through Baltimore when people connected to Lincoln caught wind of a plot. It was called the Baltimore Plot, and it was an alleged conspiracy by Confederate sympathizers. Or because, well, I guess what would then be called Confederate sympathizers. This was mere weeks before the war actually started, but these were quote unquote what you would call Confederate sympathizers to take him out. Um, I believe Lincoln and his team took this threat seriously. He was rerouted, but in 1864, a sniper literally missed Lincoln's head by inches, and the bullet passed through his hat as he rode on his horse late evening, unguarded, north from the White House to the soldiers' home at the time. So that was a near miss, another near miss. I guess people would say back then that was staged. Back in 1909, President Taft was in Mexico, meeting the leader of Mexico at that time, when a man, 52-year-old Julius Bergerson, was holding a concealed palm pistol standing at the El Paso Chamber of Commerce building. He was subdued when he was just 1 foot away from President Taft and the Mexican leader. The next year, there was a plot thwarted against the life of President Taft in Massachusetts. A man reportedly overheard a plot in Boston to take out President Biden. No, Jesus Christ, President Trump. And the threat never materialized, but they took it seriously. The next incident happened in 1928. President-elect Hoover was embarking on a 10-nation goodwill tour of Central and South America. While he was in Chile, a plot to take him out by Argentine anarchists was thwarted. The group was led by a man named Severino di Gioviani, who planned to blow up Hoover's train as it crossed the Argentinian Central Plain. The bombers was arrested before he could place the explosives on the rail. In 1933, President-elect Franklin Roosevelt was in Miami, Florida, with Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak, when a man named Giuseppe Zangara fired shots at Roosevelt in Miami. However, although he intended to hit Roosevelt, a woman hit his arm, Zangara's arm, with her purse, which altered his trajectory. And instead of hitting Roosevelt, the bullets hit Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak, who died the very next month. In 1943, in the midst of World War II, Joseph Stalin, at the Tehran Conference, told Roosevelt that there was a German plot that their intelligence picked up on to take out FDR at that time. There were two plots to take out President Harry Truman. The first one in 1947. The one that was almost successful was in 1950. But they were not able to get to Truman, the people that were trying to take him out. But they did take out a White House policeman. In 1960, John F. Kennedy, who unfortunately 3 years later was successfully taken out. In 1960, when he was vacationing in Palm Beach, Florida, a deranged lunatic by the name of Richard Paul Pavlik, who was virulently racist, and he hated Catholics, planned to crash his dynamite-laden 1950 Buick into Kennedy's vehicle, but he changed his mind after seeing Kennedy's wife and daughter bid him goodbye. President Nixon was targeted twice. In 1972, Arthur Bremer carried a firearm to a motorcade in Ottawa, Canada, intending to take out Nixon, but the president's car went too fast for Bremer to get a good shot. The next day, Bremer thought he saw Nixon's car outside of Center Block, but it had disappeared by the time he could retrieve his gun from his hotel room. 1 month later, in May of 1972, it was Arthur Bremer who hunted down and shot and seriously injured the governor of Alabama, George Wallace, who was paralyzed from the waist down and was in excruciating pain. He survived, but was in excruciating pain until his death in 1998. In 1974, Samuel Bick planned to take out Nixon by crashing a commercial airliner into the White House. Obviously, this did not succeed. There were 3 different attempts on President Gerald Ford. 2 of them came within 17 days of each other in 1975. There was an attempt, or at least there was going to be an attempt on the life of President Carter in 1979, by a man named Raymond Lee Harvey, who was an Ohio-born unemployed American drifter. John Hinckley Jr., the man who seriously wounded Reagan in 1981, a few months before, plotted to take out Jimmy Carter, who was campaigning for re-election, but he lost his nerve. This was, I think, in October of 1980. I think I spoke about this a few times. George H.W. Bush, just a few months after his term expired in 1993, was in Kuwait when it was learned that individuals believed to be working, I think it was Kuwaiti and Iraqis, believed to be working for Saddam Hussein, were trying to take him out by using a car bomb during his visit to Kuwait University. It's this incident that some people believe was the motivation for George W. Bush to do what he did in Iraq during his presidency. Revenge. Bill Clinton was the target of 5 different plots, including one that came after his presidency in 2018. George W. Bush, you may remember this, those of you old enough to remember, while giving a speech in the Freedom Square in the country of Georgia, a man named Vladimir Arutyonin threw a live Soviet-made RG-35 hand grenade toward the podium. The grenade had its pull pin, and it was within close proximity of Bush, but it did not explode because a red tartan handkerchief was wrapped tightly around it, preventing the safety lever from detaching. After escaping that day, the man who attempted to take out Bush, Arutunian, was arrested in July 2005. And there was a plot a couple of years ago to take out former President Bush that was thwarted by law enforcement. Barack Obama was targeted more than any other president. There were at least 8 different serious threats against Barack Obama. All of them were thwarted. And then, of course, we lead to Donald John Trump. And some of you may remember this, but there was a campaign rally back in 2016 where a man, the rally was in Nevada, there was a man who attempted to take the revolver from a police officer who was there working security. He was thwarted before he could get the gun. He said that he was attempting to take out Trump. And there were, before Saturday's incident, 2 other incidences where men were attempting to take out Trump. Last year, there was also an incident where a person in Missouri tried to take out Joe Biden, but the security and Secret Service forces were able to thwart this threat. This is the thing. Um, it's very, very, very difficult to protect one human being um, if people are, if a person is really, really determined to try to do something against somebody, it's really, really hard to thwart that threat. It is. It takes a lot of networking, and sometimes it takes a little luck. And for the most part, Secret Service has been very lucky. But sometimes there have been lapses in judgment and lapses in security, which has led to some failures. Incidentally, before William McKinley, presidents really were not protected that well because there was a belief that presidents should be accessible to the American people. Now, no, there were maybe police officers at times, but a lot of times presidents were not guarded at all. Uh, Someone could literally just walk into the White House back in the old days in the early 1800s and do something. But at that time, we just didn't have wanton violence in this country. And the political nastiness was much at a lower level. Starting with the incidences involving Jackson and with Lincoln's death, then presidents started maybe having police protection. Then what happened with Garfield happened, but there still was a trepidation in guarding the. There was trepidation in sealing off the president from the American people. You saw a slight increase from maybe 2 police officers to maybe 4 or 5, but still it wasn't really seen as, a constant thing that the president had to have. Maybe when he was in a crowded situation, the local police would be there to protect them, but constant, not really. That changed with William McKinley. When William McKinley was taken out, that's when they said, okay, we got to get serious about this. So that's when the United States Secret Service was finally formally created. And over the years, the Secret Service has been augmented to include more and more people. And of course, with technology, these things have gotten better and better and better and better with each passing decade. Now it's to the point where, I've seen the security presence of a president or presidential candidate. Remember, Barack Obama was in RVA years and years ago when he ran for president back in '08. I saw the presence, and it's when it's done and implemented in the correct manner, it's like you feel like there's an army presence with the president is there. And I did see um, the snipers on the roof. You could see it. You could see the scopes. I couldn't see them, but I could definitely see the snipers. And I think I saw at least 5 of them. So I'll put it like this. If a person is going to do that, they have to be willing to, they got to realize they ain't getting out of there alive. You ain't going to get away. You know what I'm saying? This ain't 1829. You will be um, a mangled corpse attempting that. So, uh, but in all seriousness though, um, we're in a period of time right now where the rhetoric has gotten too bad. We're even seeing it in sports. You know what I'm saying? You're seeing YouTubers getting threatened because of opinions, and we're just in a real screwed up place right now in our society, man. Much nastier than I remember as a kid, and it was bad then. But it's just ridiculous, man. But like I said, I have my opinions about politics and leaders, but I don't wish harm on people. You know what I'm saying? That's just how I am. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.